It's called anthropology. Maybe you've ever heard of it. I don't know. Are you recording?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Hello, kids. Today we're going to talk about ethnography. Ethnography is a fake word. It's a fake word made up by fake people because the French loved the Greeks so much. Not the actual Greeks, who were actually living at the time, who were pretty much, they were content to leave to be killed by the Ottomans. But the Greeks, from philosophers of Aristotle and Socrates, now they loved them, those Greeks. Loved them a lot. So when they started going about into the Enlightenment era, they decided we need a fake word for all our gobbledygook. And that was this fake word, which is now a real word. Ethnos means people, folk, clan, or tribe. And graphos means to write or to write about. And so ethnography is essentially the process of writing about a tribe or a folk or a clan. So in the olden days, back in the 1600s and 1700s, pretty much all the way up until the 1800s actually, the proper way of doing this was essentially we have our enlightened, glorious civilization from which all the well springs of the earth come. And we have barbarous savages who probably eat their babies or something, that some random guy who keeps a journal decided, you know what? I'm gonna make some shit up.
Can you say shit in this?
That's a good question. So, ethnography, you're gonna start with, you have these guys in towers at colonial outposts during the 1600s, 1500s, and they're gonna be writing journals, observing who they deem to be barbarous savages who aren't like us, who have foreign ways. And part of it is mostly voyeuristic, and it's kind of racist, and it basically sells as a fantasy novel would sell today. It's lurid tales of evil civilizations on the edge of the empire. But as time goes on, we're going to see that a couple of people actually start to take it seriously. Franz Boas is known as the father of anthropology. And he's known as the father of anthropology for a couple of reasons. One, he's got a great mustache. But two, he came up and revolutionized the concept of anthropology because he came up with these two perspectives and he changed the entire concept of he reinvented the concept of ethnography, which I can now pronounce.
Yay!
So originally, when we had the voyeuristic concept of barbarous civilizations that are tiered, so you have the culture that coincidentally happens to be the person who's doing the ethnography zone on the top, and the person who happens that no one gives a crap about on the bottom. So when you have a tiered civilization system where your civilization is obviously at the top because you're the greatest guys ever, and whatever civilization is as far away from yours as possible is on the bottom because it's convenient, you have to redefine that concept entirely in order to come up with something that isn't hideously racist. Because Franz Boas started looking at cultures within their own context and said that you cannot consider cultures in tiered format, but rather you have to consider them from within the circumstances that the culture came about from. He revolutionized the concept of ethnography, and he comes up with
these two
concepts of thought.
with emic being a viewpoint from within the culture, which is generally something that we try to get a viewpoint of either from locals or from being embedded within the society for a long amount of time. And the edic, or without concept of viewing the culture, which is essentially similar to the voyeuristic concept of earlier, but trying to be more objective about it and trying to step out both of your culture and the outside culture. So this revolution in ethnography and what ethnography stands for manages to pull us out from the racist voyeurism and into an actual field of science. And it's all because of this man and his fantastic mustache and his fantastic bow tie. So now we have to ask, what does it take to challenge racism in science? Well, it turns out in order to challenge scientific racism, you need a lot of bombs. After the defeat of Nazi Germany during World War II, the entire concept of eugenics and scientific racism, where one culture was superior or above another, got extremely discredited because if you kill 6 million people, there's going to be consequences, especially if they're innocent people. So, Nazis are gone, now you've got these two superpowers, and they don't really agree on very much, but they do both agree that colonialism is bad. So, as we enter into the 1950s, not only are we seeing a restructuring in order to be less scientifically racist, but we're also seeing a restructuring where it's actually not very kosher to just invade other countries.
Which it shouldn't have been in the first place.
So this is where we're going to see where Franz Boas's ideas are actually going to enter into the mainstream, and we're going to be embedded into the culture sort of aspect of actually observing and actually talking to and actually trusting the people who you are observing. So, after the Cold War sort of collapses, we get the sort of furthering of this concept of depoliticized ethnography. So, after the Cold War ends, you have the UN, and you have a bunch of nation states that share essentially the same political system, where they're in integrated capitalist economies, and now we're going to see this sort of wellspring of cooperation because there are no other options. So, as they're moving into this capitalist framework, it's actually a lot easier to travel between countries because nobody's suspecting that you're going to be a spy, and you see the continuing of the respect of ethnography. But you also see that ethnography is going to start to be used as a basis where crisis and crisis management in countries and international relations actually gets trusted and built upon, and you can actually make some observations about what the other side needs and how they're going to go about getting it. Modern applications of ethnography. First of all, you got Ebola recently? No, you didn't get it recently, because we had a team of UN peacekeepers, doctors, medical experts, the World Health Organization, and ethnographers who were working to make sure that the people doing their jobs knew how to actually respectfully treat the culture. Part of the reason for the large, widespread Ebola outbreak during 2014 was improper burial practices and just generally unsanitary cultural conditions in general. Because Ebola is passed through, essentially, through fluids such as the spit, which, with dead bodies, you don't want to leave dead bodies lying around, and you don't want to have funeral practices where people are crowding around the body and just letting it decompose, which was what West African sort of societies were focused around. But they didn't know as much about how the disease was transferred from person to person. We have a long tradition of medical history which lets us know that it's going to be transferred through your blood. They did not have that same sort of explanation, and they didn't have the tools and cultural wherewithal in order to deal with that. And because the World Health Organization, which was trying to fight the Ebola outbreak, and the locals had different conceptions as to how funeral rites should be practiced, and because there was clashes between them, there were long-standing difficulties in actually getting these practices throughout the countries that were affected. But because we had ethnographers and anthropologists on the scene who understood the culture from both sides, we managed to get some people who could stand out and point out, this is what you're doing wrong, this is how you need to be practicing this, and this is how you need to be engaging with the community, which is why we are not all dead from Ebola, presumably. When it comes to modern day ethnography, we look at societies and we compare and contrast them to see how one society developed one way while another society developed another. Now, on the surface, it seems as if Egypt being different from the United States of America makes a lot of sense because they're two different countries with two different traditions. But when it comes to humans, this is actually very odd because you don't see different birds having different cultures, and you don't see different ape species having different cultures either. They remain mostly the same across species. So the fact that the United States of America is socially different from Egypt is actually very fascinating, both from a biological perspective and an anthropological perspective. So, why is the United States of America different from Egypt? Well, the United States of America is an industrialized society. It's mostly Christian. It has very different areas and ecological climates as opposed to Egypt, which has essentially two, where the United States has, I couldn't even label them all on here, so I didn't even want to try, but essentially tropical areas, desert areas, temperate areas, winter arid areas, very diverse and very spread out, as opposed to Egypt, which is very concentrated. And if you produce stressors between these societies, they will act differently in response to those stressors, which is another concept of ethnography in the modern sense
because it is concerned with crisis management and how to essentially make the world keep spinning around in the modern sense, of course. We also have ethnography in the sense of more interesting things where you're just going off and asking tribes, but in the more generalistic United Nations, worldwide sense, people care about it because it helps us with these political conceptions.